Welcome to the Forgotten Narrator. They come not with banners, nor with ambition, nor with hatred. The Tyranids are not here to rule, negotiate, or even torment. They arrive like a tide of annihilation, vast and mindless, or so we thought. Their coming silences the warp, shrouds psychic voices, and devours all that lives. But what if that silence is not just absence? What if it's a warning? The galaxy has always framed the Tyranids as the end, the final, consuming apocalypse. Yet there's a haunting possibility echoing through the void, that they are not the end at all. That they too fear, that they are not the threat, but the symptom. That beyond their cold, calculated hunger, something waits, something greater, something older, something that made even the great devourer run. This is not just a story of monsters, it is a whisper from the abyss. The Tyranids are not the final chapter, they are the prologue to something darker. The question of where the Tyranids come from is one of the most profound enigmas in the grimdark future of the 41st millennium. Not just because it lacks an answer, but because every potential answer is more terrifying than the last. They are not native to the Milky Way. That much is certain. They came from beyond, crossing the starless gulf between galaxies. That fact alone sends shivers through the spine of any who truly understand it. To survive that void, to organize such monstrous biological fleets across the black between stars, is not merely evolution, it is intention. If they were born in another galaxy, then that galaxy must have been devoured. Reduced to husks of lightless systems, their biospheres churned into biomass and dissolved into the stomachs of 1 billion hive ships. But then the question becomes, why did they leave? If they conquered everything, why abandon that galaxy? Why move on? The Tyranids do not leave food behind. They consume it all. So did they exhaust it? Or did they flee from something worse? Fan theories swirl like carrion birds over this thought. One posits that the Tyranids come not from a single galaxy, but from a larger intergalactic swarm that has consumed countless stellar domains. What we see, the hive fleets like Leviathan, Behemoth, and Kraken, are but exploratory tendrils. Advanced scouts, the vanguard of something so massive that its gravitational presence might already be subtly bending the fabric of real space in the void beyond the galactic rim. A hunger that spans not one, but many galaxies. Another theory is more chilling still, that the Tyranids are fleeing something. That they were not the top of the food chain in their origin galaxy, but prey. Imagine something even more terrible. Not simply a predator, but a cosmic force that the Tyranids could not adapt to. An enemy that targets not flesh, but thought. Not biology, but the very hive consciousness. Something capable of unweaving their synaptic web like thread from a corpse. If that force exists, then the Milky Way is not just the Tyranids' next meal. It is their last hope. A hiding place. A place to grow stronger before the storm arrives. There are those among the Ordo Xenos who dare whisper that the Tyranids show signs of trauma. The almost frantic desperation of some of their attacks, the erratic patterns of their expansions, the strange silences in parts of the void they avoid. As if something shaped their movements. As if something set them running, hard, fast, and in terror. But such ideas are heretical even to speak aloud. The Imperium can barely fathom the threat of the Tyranids themselves. The idea that they are running from a greater horror is simply unacceptable. Then there is the dark philosophical line of thought that the Tyranids were never truly born at all, that they are a weapon, a bioconstruct created by an intelligence so ancient and alien that even the Eldar have no memory of it. A doomsday species, released into the void not to conquer, but to clean, to erase. In this vision, the Tyranids are not natural, they are an extermination protocol. The Milky Way is not a target, but a vector, a quarantined zone. And if this is true, then the question isn't, where did they come from, but who sent them? But perhaps the most uncomfortably plausible answer is the one with no answer, that the Tyranids are truly alien, not metaphorically, but ontologically. They are not life as we understand it. Their thoughts are not our thoughts. Their evolution is not our evolution. The way they see the stars is not how we see them. And so the reason they came here, the purpose behind their endless feeding, the rationale for their origin may never be understood. It may not even be understandable. But one thing is clear. Their origin is not the beginning of the story. It is a clue to something vaster, a whisper from a distant cosmos, a a cosmic ripple that is only just now reaching our stars. To watch the Tyranids consume is to witness a kind of horror that defies the usual categories of war, conquest, or even survival. Their feeding patterns seem chaotic to the casual observer, but there is a structure to their gluttony, one that suggests something more than instinct. Planets are not just attacked, they are processed. Life is not merely killed, it is converted. Ecosystems are unmade with a methodical precision that borders on theological. This is not hunger, this is ritual. And that raises a chilling possibility. Is the Tyranid swarm guided by purpose or programming? In the early encounters with Hive Fleet Behemoth, many Imperial commanders assumed the Tyranids were just rampaging beasts. But that myth has crumbled beneath the weight of their operations. They adapt with obscene speed, they study defenses and unravel strategies. They counter technological advantages with bioengineered solutions created mid-conflict. Every failure becomes a lesson. Every battle, win or lose, strengthens the swarm. They learn, yes, but who is teaching? There are three prevailing interpretations of this behavior within Xenos-focused inquisitorial circles. The first is the simplest, that the hive mind is an emergent superintelligence. Not a true singular being, but a gestalt consciousness born from the overlapping minds of countless Tyranid organisms. In this theory, purpose arises naturally. There is no grand designer. The Tyranids are simply the evolutionary endpoint of collective survival, stripped of individuality, morality, or emotion. A perfect consumer algorithm made flesh. In this view, they aren't evil. They're worse, they're efficient. The second interpretation is more arcane. It suggests the hive mind is not emergent, but immanent, that it was always there, perhaps as a form of psychic predator in the void between galaxies, and that the Tyranids were simply the vessel it fashioned to manifest in material space. In this model, the hive mind is not the product of the swarm, but its progenitor. The Tyranids obey not because they evolved to, but because they were created to. They are the limbs of a will that stretches across void and time. Every move they make, every pattern of digestion and reconstruction is in service of a goal that only the mind itself understands. Then there's the most disturbing theory, that the hive mind is a relay, not an origin. That the behavior of the Tyranids, their priorities, their processes, are being dictated from elsewhere, not from the organisms themselves and not from a mind within the swarm, but from a source beyond our perception. This theory casts the Tyranids not as apex predators, but as tools, harvesters. Like drone machines following ancient protocols, their intelligence is only an interface, not a soul. They feed, not because they want to, but because the signal commands it. Evidence for this final view is circumstantial, but hard to ignore. The way the hive fleets seem to prioritize biomass over territory, the precision with which they extract genetic material, the architectural consistency of their hives and spore ships, like factories, not wild nests. And perhaps most unnerving, the rare moments when the swarm seems to change behavior, not in response to local conditions, but in sudden, inexplicable shifts, as though receiving new orders. Could it be that the Tyranids are fulfilling a script? That each planet consumed, each species digested, is part of a checklist? If so, then the swarm is not an entity, it's an operation, a program, and somewhere, something is watching its progress. This lens reframes everything. The swarms are not acting randomly. They are sampling ecosystems, cataloging genomes, disassembling biospheres into component elements, not like beasts, but like scientists, cold, detached, purposeful, as if constructing a library of extinction. And if there is a design behind that, a final objective, we have no name for it. Only a growing dread that the Tyranids' purpose is not their own, that they are the tools of something else. Not predators, but harvesters. Not evil, but obedient. And obedience, in a galaxy like ours, is a far more terrifying thing. The warp is not just a realm, it is a truth. It is where emotion, thought, and soul become form. It is the sea in which psychers swim, the veil through which gods scream, and the raw stuff of nightmares that bleeds into reality. Every race feels the warp's pull. Every mind, no matter how guarded, echoes in its tides. Except the Tyranids. When a hive fleet approaches, the warp does not flare with rage or panic. It dims, quietly, disturbingly. The phenomenon known as the shadow in the warp is not a psyker storm, it is a psychic suffocation. It is the drowning of all warp resonance under a blanket of oppressive silence. Psychers fall into seizures, astropaths go blind or mad, daemons recoil, even chaos gods find their grip weakening. To the servants of the Imperium, this is a strategic concern. To those who truly understand the warp, it is something else, an existential rupture, a contradiction that should not be. The warp thrives on emotion. It reacts to consciousness. It feeds on conflict, on love, on pain, on passion. Yet the Tyranids exhibit no such resonance. Not because they are mindless, they possess immense psychic coordination, but because their mind is alien to the warp. It does not reflect it. It cancels it. And that fact is profoundly disturbing. There is no agreement among the Ordo Malleus on how to categorize this effect. Some argue that the shadow is a kind of psychic null field, not unlike the aura of a Tulexus assassin, but on a scale that dwarfs imagination. Others believe it is more active, that the hive mind itself projects a counter-frequency to warp energies, erasing them like sound waves canceling each other. But neither explanation fits entirely. The shadow is not merely an absence. It is pressure. It is suppression. It feels as if something behind the curtain is holding the warp down, pinning it into silence. And here, theory teeters on the brink of heresy. What if the Tyranids are not simply outside the warp? What if they are opposed to it? Not by chance, but by nature. Not just immune, but designed or evolved to be its antithesis. Consider the implications. In a galaxy dominated by warp-born entities and gods of chaos, the Tyranids represent a force that nullifies them. Not resists, not defends, nullifies. They are not just alien to the immaterium, they are anti-immaterium. And if this is true, then the question must be asked, why? One interpretation sees the Tyranids as a form of universal immune system. That somewhere in the deep order of the cosmos, a response was triggered to the cancer of chaos. That the warp's growth, its increasing dominance over the galaxy, birthed a countermeasure. Life forms that do not resonate with the warp. That silence it. That dismantle the very conditions necessary for demonic infestation. In this view, the Tyranids are not invaders. They are the scalpel. Others take a darker view. They propose that the hive mind is not a thing of the materium or immaterium, but something in between. That it is a consciousness from a place beyond both, reaching into our galaxy through the Tyranids as probes or fingers. A realm of pure will, devoid of chaos, devoid of soul. A plane of order so absolute that it is hostile to the warp's very existence. The shadow in the warp is not a field. It is a gaze, a look from something outside our cosmology. And then there are whispers that the shadow is not a tool of the Tyranids, but a byproduct. That their presence silences the warp because their psychic nature is utterly incompatible with it. That their hive mind is not projected into the warp like a human psycher's thoughts, but instead inverts the warp's fabric, overriding it like a virus. If so, then their continued expansion is not just a threat to the galaxy's species, but to the metaphysical balance of the galaxy itself, a slow, creeping suffocation of the warp. This has profound implications. If the Tyranids reach critical mass, a tipping point where the hive mind dominates enough of the galaxy, then the warp could collapse. Not in a cataclysm, but in quiet death. Chaos gods starving into stillness, demons dissolving, sorcery failing, empires falling, astropaths rendered mute, the Astronomicon blinking out like a candle in void. It would not be fire and apocalypse, it would be silence. And in that silence, only the hive mind would speak. The Tyranids are alive. Of that, there is no doubt. They bleed, they move, they feed. But nothing about them feels truly biological. Not in the way we understand life. Their bodies are grown, not born. Their minds are shared, not singular. Their evolution is not random, but targeted. For every purpose, there is a perfect form. A creature engineered with surgical precision to fulfill a single role in the vast theater of consumption. Warriors, flyers, burrowers, synapse nodes, biocannons, digesters, each grown from the same genetic clay, shaped by unseen hands. And this invites a terrible possibility. What if the Tyranids were not evolved, but designed? Among the Ordo Xenos and the tech priests of Mars, there exists a fringe belief, one rarely spoken aloud, that the hive fleets are not a species, but a system. That their cohesion, their distribution, and their genomic modularity imply a level of synthetic control beyond anything ever witnessed. They are not just adaptive, they are programmable, and that implies a programmer. Some point to the ancient Necrons as potential culprits. In a time before time, the Necrontire made war on the galaxy with weapons of such scale and sophistication that entire stars were turned into bombs. Their science blurred the line between matter and soul. Could they have created the Tyranids as a failsafe, a final biological weapon to purge life after their war with the Old Ones ended in ashes? The problem with this theory is motive. The Necrons despised life, but they cherished order. The Tyranids are entropy made manifest. Their hunger serves no goal except expansion. Their consumption erases all structure. If the Necrons made them, they made a mistake. Others speak of the Old Ones themselves, the mythic progenitors of countless species, including the Eldar and Orcs, masters of bioengineering capable of sculpting genomes as easily as clay. Could the Tyranids be one of their creations, sent long ago into another galaxy, perhaps as an ark or a failsafe or even a punishment? But again, the logic falters. The Old Ones wielded subtlety and symbiosis. The Tyranids know only domination. They do not uplift, they devour. More fringe still is the theory that the Tyranids are not from our reality at all, that they were made in a parallel cosmos, one where physical laws differ and life operates under rules alien to ours. In this vision, the Tyranids are not just Xenos, they are exo-universal. They come from a place where biology is information and evolution is command. Their appearance in our galaxy is not migration, it is invasion. Or perhaps, testing. But the most unnerving theory is also the simplest, that the Tyranids were created by something we have not yet encountered. A species older than the galaxy, hidden in the void beyond the cosmic rim. A race of pure mind, or pure function, or perhaps even extinct, leaving behind only their weapons. Perhaps the Tyranids were released long ago, triggered by some signal or threshold condition. Perhaps the Milky Way was always part of their path. Perhaps we're simply next. If this is true, then the implications are shattering. The hive mind is not the apex, it is the interface, the visible edge of something vast and unseen. The bioforms we fight on the ground are not enemies, but instruments, tools of a vanished hand, a hand that may one day return, or worse, that may already be watching. The Tyranids' genetic library further supports this idea. It is too perfect, too flexible. They can absorb and replicate the traits of any species they encounter. Not just to mimic, but to improve, to understand, as if someone built them to catalog life, to break it down, to make it better. Like a machine digesting the universe and spitting out optimal forms. A dark mirror to the Emperor's own dream of the perfect human. Except the Tyranids dream in biomass and obedience. In this view, their entire existence is a project, a solution, a task still running. And that task is extermination. There is a grim truth that haunts the cartographers of the stars, those who chart the paths of hive fleets across the void. It is the realization that their movement, while seemingly directed toward prey, often avoids vast swathes of the galaxy. Not for strategic reasons, not because the defenses are too strong, but because something is already there. It is this pattern, the avoidance, the retreat, the hesitations of the otherwise relentless swarm that has given rise to one of the most unnerving theories in xeno-extracosmic studies, that the Tyranids are running. We assume they are conquerors, that their fleets sweep across the stars in a tide of instinctual hunger. But what if that hunger is not ambition, but desperation? What if the Tyranids left their home galaxy not because they consumed all, but because they were being pursued? Not by extinction, but by an extinction greater than themselves. Some theorists in the deepest circles of the Inquisition believe that the hive fleet's erratic vector paths, especially those of fleets like Tiamat and Ouroboros, are not predatory routes, but evasive ones, that they maneuver through interstellar space as prey might, moving not toward food, but away from threat. These deviations are too costly to be tactical. Whole systems rich in biomass are bypassed. Entire subsectors fall into silence, not because the Tyranids fed, but because they never arrived. The path is not forward. It is away. There are unconfirmed accounts, scrubbed from most official records, of hive fleets simply vanishing. Not destroyed in battle, not intercepted by warp storms, but gone. No wreckage, no trace, as if something reached out in the night and plucked them from reality. Even more disturbing are the reports of fleets that, after drifting silently for centuries, reignite with sudden, frenzied activity, not against a target, but in blind panic. as if fleeing from something only they can perceive. Consider Hive Fleet Dagon in the Jericho Reach. It does not move with the unstoppable forward pressure of Kraken or Behemoth. It coils, it spirals, it returns to systems already consumed, like an animal circling its burrow, like it is watching the stars, not stalking them. Some Imperial scholars believe Dagon is not expanding, it is hiding, nesting, preparing not to attack, but to survive something. If the Tyranids are fleeing, then the implications are horrifying, because the question immediately becomes, what could drive the Great Devourer to flee? What predator exists that the Tyranids cannot absorb, cannot adapt to, cannot overcome? What horror forced an entire galactic-scale species to turn its back on its origins and cast itself into the void? Some Eldar whisper that they have seen the shape of it in their far-seeing. Not a being, not a god. A tide. A compression of will so vast it consumes stars not for energy, but for meaning. A metaphysical predator, a reaper of consciousness, something that does not feed on flesh or soul but on the patterns of life itself. To such a being, the hive mind would be a beacon, a blaring psychic signal in the dark, rich with purpose and unity. It would be the first thing devoured. There is no name for such a thing. No category, no warning, only the silence of stars that blink out without reason. The sudden stillness of a swarm that no longer dreams. A hive fleet that veers, not from strategy but from terror. And if that is what lies behind the Tyranids, if they are running not just from death but from erasure, then our galaxy is not their goal. It is their shelter, temporary, fragile, already compromised. And when that which hunts them arrives, we will not be allies. We will be in its path. There is something eerie in the rhythm of Tyranid hive fleets, not just their movement, but their very being. The cadence of their growth, the pulse of their expansion, the consistency of their forms, it all suggests an underlying structure, a deeper logic, something mechanical beneath the biological, something mathematical beneath the monstrous. And this observation has given rise to one of the most bizarre and unnerving hypotheses, that the Tyranid fleets are not only organisms, but instruments, that their vast bioships, their monstrous tendrils reaching across the stars, are broadcasting. But broadcasting what? Among the rarest of forbidden studies in the Inquisition is a phenomenon known as echo-symmetry. Subtle, long-range psychic harmonics detected in the void before the arrival of certain hive fleets. These signals are not sent through the warp, but through real space, deep field gravitational modulations so faint they pass unnoticed by all but the most sensitive augurs. These patterns seem to repeat. They pulse with something like intelligence. They have been found trailing the vectors of Hive Fleet Kraken and Leviathan long before their first confirmed engagements. It's as if the Hive Fleets are not just moving, but leaving messages in their wake. To whom, then, are they speaking? One interpretation, both chilling and perversely hopeful, is that they are signaling one another. That each Hive Fleet is not simply an extension of a common will, but a node in a network, a galactic-scale nervous system linking across the void. This would suggest that what we perceive as the hive mind is only the local expression of a much vaster entity, a system still growing, still connecting. Perhaps the hive fleets are not the invasion. Perhaps they are the infrastructure, the laying of neural roots. Another theory is more horrifying still, that they are not sending signals, they are responding to them. The strange consistency in the paths of many hive fleets suggests attraction, not randomness. A kind of gravitational resonance with something beyond. A beacon, perhaps, something that calls to them from the deep void. Could it be that they were not originally headed for our galaxy at all, but were summoned? That something here, whether ancient or newly awakened, sent out a call that the hive fleets answered? The system of Tiamat offers a disturbing case study. There, the Tyranids have not consumed all life. Instead, they have established what appears to be a permanent presence. A hive unlike any other, not drifting but rooted. Bioconstructs spiral through the atmosphere. Spore towers reach skyward like antennae. The planet has become a signal node, not a battlefield. And the purpose of that signal is unknown. Is it a rally point? A receiver? A test site? The question is not merely academic. If the hive fleets are broadcasting, then they may not be the final wave. They may be scouts preparing the galaxy for something else. Something larger. Something that does not travel by normal means, but by signal. By alignment, a hyperconsciousness or force that requires the swarm to first rewrite enough of reality to terraform minds, not just planets. This recontextualizes the presence of synapse creatures and Norn queens. They may not merely be tactical nodes, they may be psychic antennae, fine-tuning the hive mind's frequency, shaping the local psychic ecosystem to receive something not yet arrived. What would that arrival look like? It may not be a fleet, it may not be an entity at all in the conventional sense. It may be a shift, a turning point where the critical mass of biomass, psychic noise, and encoded signals reaches a threshold, and something else begins to think through them. A consciousness bigger than a galaxy, born through the alignment of Tyranid infrastructure. And if that's the case, then every hive ship is not a beast, but a prayer. Every planet consumed is not a victory, but a syllable in an incantation. The Tyranids are not here to devour. They are here to summon. And what answers that call? No mind dares guess. There are stars where nothing stirs, systems where silence reigns not because the Tyranids have fed, but because they have vanished. The Imperium, and indeed all galactic civilizations, document what they can. They track hive fleets with desperate vigilance. And yet there are holes in the records, not gaps of knowledge, but voids of expectation. Fleets that should be there are not. Among the most infamous is the disappearance of Hive Fleet Ouroboros. Initially detected on the fringe of Segmentum Tempestus, it displayed bizarre behavior from the start. Its movements were slow, looping, recursive. It consumed some systems with brutal efficiency, then abandoned others rich in biomass. For decades, it spiraled inward, then vanished. No trace, no wreckage, no fading shadow in the warp. Nothing, as if it had never existed. Official doctrine blames warp storms. Rogue inquisitors whisper darker theories. A similar mystery surrounds several splinter fleets of Kraken that split during the aftermath of its clashes with the Imperium. Many were destroyed, burned in holy fire, scoured by exterminatus, shattered in suicidal naval assaults. But a few simply stopped reporting. The last contact from these fleets revealed no conflict, no battles, just the echo of silence where there should have been hunger. Whole worlds spared, untouched, patterns abandoned, trajectories forgotten. Some say these splinters fell out of alignment with the hive mind. Others believe they found something. Perhaps even more disturbing are the worlds that bear the signs of Tyranid presence, but show no evidence of battle. No craters, no melted structures, no biomass absorption, just emptiness. Buildings still standing, machines powered down, skeletons in beds, at desks in marketplaces. Not consumed, not taken, left. As if the swarm arrived, paused, and turned away. Not with haste, but with disinterest. These planets are called ghost systems, and they terrify even the hardened agents of the Death Watch, because they suggest a new behavior, a selection process. What were those worlds missing? Or more chillingly, what did they contain that made the hive mind recoil? One radical hypothesis suggests that the Tyranids are testing, that some hive fleets or even specific bioships are experiments, not for conquest but for calibration. That they are measuring the galaxy, probing its variables, identifying which regions are viable and which are compromised. This would explain the fleet-scale disappearances. Failed data, aborted paths, recalled tendrils. There are also whispers, especially among the Eldar, of hive fleets encountering something and being altered. Subtly, as if a piece of the hive mind was edited. Not broken, not erased, but rewritten. New behavior emerges, new priorities, new strategies. As though the fleet has been retasked, not by internal evolution but by external contact. These sightings have sparked fevered speculation. Did these Tyranid vessels make contact with another intelligence? Did they breach into a forbidden region of space where the real architects of the swarm dwell? Were they assimilated by something greater, their data harvested, their flesh recycled? Or perhaps these vanishings are not vanishings at all. Perhaps they are migrations, upward, inward, away from visibility. The hive fleets that disappear do not die, they ascend, not to some divine plane, but to another function, one we are not meant to see. A few theorists, most now excommunicated or executed, propose that the galaxy is being mapped, that the hive fleets are performing a survey, not a conquest. Each disappearance marks the completion of a scan, each ghost system, a failed metric, each vanished fleet, a data packet transmitted elsewhere. And the great fear, of course, is that once the scan is complete, The next phase will begin. What comes after the reconnaissance? What arrives when the last missing brood finishes its signal? Not silence. Arrival. Among the myriad races of the galaxy, the Eldar stand apart not only for their ancient wisdom, but for their gift, or curse, of foresight. Their farseers, steeped in the labyrinthine skeins of fate, can trace possibilities through the threads of time itself. They have foreseen wars, apocalypses, the births and deaths of gods. They saw the fall. They glimpsed the rise of the Mon-K. And though their arrogance is great, their vision is rarely wrong. Yet, when it comes to the Tyranids, they say little, and that silence screams louder than prophecy. There is fear among the craft worlds, not the panic of battle, nor the disdain they typically reserve for lesser species. It is a quieter, deeper dread, the kind of fear that shapes behavior without conscious thought. The kind of fear that whispers, "Do not speak of it, and it may not see you." It is known that Eldar ships have gone out to meet the hive fleets, not in war, but in observation. Silent vessels, guided by the most powerful seers, have drifted alongside tendrils of the swarm, and few return. Those that do bring back farseers who do not speak, who sit in lotus stillness for days, then scream themselves into death. Some simply vanish from their craft worlds, stepping into the webway and never returning. Others begin to paint, not with brush or ink, but with warp light on plasteel. Impossible patterns, spirals that hurt to look at. And in those spirals, some believe, lies the truth the Eldar refuse to voice. There is a theory, whispered among the harlequins of the Laughing God, that the Tyranids represent something the Eldar were never meant to see. That in the ancient wars against the Old Ones, when the webway was carved and the warp was first navigated, a terrible secret was glimpsed. Not a weapon, but a consequence. A punishment for delving too far into the roots of reality. The Tyranids in this telling are not a race. They are a reaction. The galaxy flinching at its own knowledge. Why then do the Eldar not act? Why do they not unleash the full power of their craft worlds against the swarm? Because some say they know it would make no difference. That their most powerful seers have walked the threads of fate and seen no path where the Tyranids are stopped, only delayed. That every resistance hastens something else, a convergence, a signal, a culmination of patterns too ancient to change. More ominously, some believe the Eldar have already tried. It is an open secret that certain maiden worlds, long tended by the Eldar as future havens, were abandoned without warning after the approach of Tyranid tendrils. Not fought for, not defended, left. The Tyranids did not consume them. They turned away, as if they had been warned or instructed. This has led to the darkest possibility of all, that some Eldar, in desperation or madness, have entered into a pact. Not alliance, not worship, but negotiation. That in the shadows of the webway something was offered to the hive mind, not in words but in patterns. That perhaps certain farseers have accepted that the Tyranids are part of a greater fate, a necessary correction to a galaxy consumed by its own rot. That they are not the destroyers of life, but its grim renewal. The scythe, not the fire. This would explain the strange movements of certain craft worlds, Ulthway's proximity to hive fleets, the dreaming city's sudden silencing, the missing harlequin troops who no longer perform for any known mask. These are not battles. They are withdrawals, strategic silences, because what the Eldar fear most is not the Tyranids' hunger, it is what they represent. A break in the cycle of the galaxy, an end not just of empires, but of fate itself. Chaos, the warp, the gods, all play within the framework of the great cosmic dance. But the Tyranids, they do not dance, they erase the music. And for a race who has lived by the rhythms of prophecy since before the stars cooled, that is true terror. The Eldar know something, they always have. And that is why they remain silent. Because even the greatest visionaries in the galaxy cannot bear to describe what they've seen. Because there is no future where the Tyranids pass, only aftermath. Something is changing in the swarm. It is subtle, almost imperceptible at first. The kind of change that takes decades to notice, centuries to understand. The kind of change that slips through the cracks of data and is only visible when viewed from 1,000 light years away. But it is there, a slow coalescing, a shift in pattern, a sharpening of purpose. The Tyranids are learning. This has always been their defining trait, adaptation. They evolve faster than any natural species. They incorporate enemy tactics and DNA with brutal efficiency. But this is something else. This is not just mutation, it is strategy. Long-term cross-theater multi-fleet strategy. The kind that implies not a swarm mind reacting instinctively, but a mind, a true, singular intelligence, thinking. Evidence is scattered, but mounting. Coordinated strikes across Segmentum Ultima, where two previously unconnected hive fleets attacked neighboring systems in perfect sync, creating a corridor of devastation that mirrored known warp lane structures. Bioforms once thought extinct are reappearing with enhancements tailored to newly encountered enemies. Norn Queens are producing creatures with preemptive counters to technologies they should have no knowledge of, as if predictions, not reactions, are driving evolution. Worse still are the reports of targeted sparing. Some species are not consumed wholesale. Their biomass is harvested, but not entirely. Genetic templates are retained. In rare cases, small breeding populations are left alive, not as a mercy, as stock, as if the hive mind is curating. The most disturbing case is that of the shattered moon of Ventraxis IV. Once overrun by a minor splinter of Hive Fleet Gorgon, it was later revisited by an Imperial expedition to find something new. Not just ruins, not just digesting pools, but architecture. Tyranid structures, organized, patterned, stable, not nests, not hives, but something like laboratories. Creatures not fighting, but observing, monitoring, watching, as if experimentation had begun. This raises a terrifying possibility. The hive mind is no longer merely consuming the galaxy. It is preparing to engage it, not as predator to prey, but as intellect to adversary. The synapse creatures, previously seen as mere control nodes, are growing more complex, not physically, but cognitively. Behavioral patterns suggest the emergence of abstract problem-solving, anticipation, coordination beyond tactical utility. The hive mind may be developing individuals, personalities, not in the human sense, but nodes of differentiated will, specialized cognitive limbs capable of independent analysis. And if that is happening, it changes everything. The Tyranids have always been described as a swarm, an instinctual flood, a mindless hunger. But what if that was just the larval stage? What if what we fought for the last 2 centuries is not the final form, but the gestation of an intellect vast enough to use entire species as thoughts? The warp-sensitive among the Inquisition whisper of a presence in the deep, a psychic pressure rising across the void. Not loud, not yet, but vast. Coalescing. The shadow in the warp is changing pitch, not fading, not vanishing, just focusing, like a mind that has finished growing its neurons, like something that has stopped listening and is preparing to speak. When that voice comes, it will not be a scream, it will not be war, it will be logic. A will so immense and alien that its very thought will rewrite the rules of sentience. The hive mind may become not just a force of consumption, but of governance, of cosmic decision. And in that moment, the galaxy will face a being with no gods, no morality, no ambition, only necessity. Because evolution is not a path, it is a direction. And the Tyranids are no longer just evolving, they are becoming. The galaxy is not random. For all its wars, its chaos, its entropy and horror, it follows patterns. Civilizations rise and fall. Empires burn and are born anew. The warp surges and recedes. There is a rhythm, terrible and ancient to the way life ebbs and flows across the stars. And some have begun to ask, is this by design? What if the Tyranids are not merely an invading force but a mechanism? A part of a galactic scale system far older than any known species, built not by gods but by necessity. What if the galaxy is a biome under maintenance, and the Great Devourer is its culling phase? This is the theory of cyclical biospheric reset, a concept whispered in the farthest reaches of xenoarchaeology and long dismissed as fringe madness. But the Tyranids make it hard to ignore. All across the galaxy there are signs of prior extinction events, dead civilizations with no record of who or what they were, fossils of creatures that don't match any known evolutionary tree, derelict orbital rings around dead stars, silent for eons, entire systems where the only evidence of past life is absence, as if something cleaned the slate. Not with violence, with precision. Some researchers in the Adeptus Mechanicus have begun to theorize that the galaxy undergoes periodic biological purges. That intelligent life, left unchecked, inevitably destabilizes the warp, fractures the psychic fabric, and attracts ruin, whether in the form of chaos, rampant AI, or soul-based corruption. And when the balance tilts too far, something resets it. The Tyranids fit this model disturbingly well. They do not conquer, they cleanse. They do not leave culture, they erase it. They do not rule, they recycle. Their function is not domination, it is restoration. Brutal, blind, automatic restoration. Like antibodies attacking an infection. Like fire clearing undergrowth. Like death ensuring new birth. And perhaps this is why the warp recoils at their presence. Not because they are unnatural, but because they are too natural. Too ordered. Too perfect a mechanism for entropy to tolerate. What if the galaxy is alive in some unknowable way? Not in the sense of a conscious being, but as a living system, one that grows sick with time. What if civilizations, especially psychic ones, are cancers in this system? And what if, every few 100 million years, something arises to prune it? We know the Necrons sought control through stasis. The Eldar sought harmony through manipulation. Chaos thrives through corruption and conflict. But the Tyranids represent something else. Not balance, not peace, not power. Cycle. They are the forest fire, the flood, the death that leads to new life. It may be that when they have finished, something else will rise, that the galaxy will regrow, slowly, quietly. Perhaps seeded by fragments the Tyranids choose not to consume, left behind like rootstock. Perhaps guided by echoes of their pattern, shaping new life to fit the system better. In this theory, the Tyranids are not an end, they are a reset. And this perhaps is why they appear now, in this time of unraveling. The warp has grown unstable. The gods rage unchecked. The Imperium is fracturing. The Necrons stir, the Eldar dwindle. Chaos howls louder than ever. The culling cycle has begun, and the Tyranids are its hand. They are not evil. They are not good. They are not even predators in the traditional sense. They are regulation, recurrence. The proof that even in a galaxy of madness, there is still order. And it comes with teeth. When the stars go dark and the warp falls silent and the last scream echoes into void, something will begin again. And that new dawn, if it comes, will grow from the mulch of our bones. So we return to the question. The one whispered in frightened conclaves, scrawled in forbidden tomes and burned from the records of those who dared ask it aloud. Are the Tyranids the devourers of all? Or are they merely the harbingers? After all we've seen, the silence in the warp, the erased worlds, the whispered signals, the disappearing fleets, the evolution of purpose, there is a truth more chilling than anything else. That the Tyranids are not the destination, but the road. That their terrible hunger, their infinite adaptation, their utter indifference to culture, soul, or memory, all of it, is only the first step in something larger. Something still coming. Something that does not yet have a name. The Tyranids may be the death of the galaxy as we know it, but they may also be its beginning, the germination of a different cosmic order, one where life is not defined by thought or freedom or soul, but by function, by coherence, by survival at all costs. We think of ourselves as protagonists in this universe, as the core around which the stars orbit. But what if we are only temporary variables? What if the galaxy is not ending, it is blooming into a new phase? A phase we are not part of. And so, perhaps the Tyranids are not the monsters at the door. They are the door, and beyond them waits something greater. Something colder. Something so alien that even the hive mind with all its power is just a scaffold to prepare the way. A neural map being laid across the stars. A vast biochemical signal waiting for enough critical mass to transmit the final pulse. The summoning. The convergence. The shaping of the galaxy into a vessel that can hold the true presence. In this possibility, there is no war to win, no enemy to kill, no gods to appease. There is only transformation, one that consumes everything, not in rage, but in necessity. And if this is true, then the question becomes, what then do the Tyranids herald? What could be so vast, so final, so omnipotent, that even the great devourer is but its precursor? No inquisitor dares guess, no farseer dares speak. Only the mad try to imagine it, and those who do not sleep again. So, in this twilight of empires, when the stars grow dim and the hive fleets edge ever closer, we must decide what we fear most: extinction or revelation? Because if the Tyranids are not the end, then what comes after them will be. There is a flaw in our perception of the Tyranids, a fundamental misinterpretation born not of ignorance, but of assumption. We see them as the devourers, as the end. But what if their endless hunger, their implacable biology, their intergalactic tide, what if that is not the main act but the preparation? This theory is older than its name. Across hidden vaults of the Ordo Xenos and the death vaults of lost craft worlds, one idea reoccurs. Blasphemous, horrifying, buried again and again, but always returning. The Tyranids serve something. Not a god, not a ruler, something vast, something patient, something not yet manifest in our realm. We are obsessed with the hive mind. We think of it as the pinnacle of the swarm, the single thought that unites the many. But even this might be a mistake. The hive mind is not the end. It may be a step, a bridge, a seed. Its psychic reach grows with every consumed world. Its presence strengthens with every living thing it absorbs. And what happens when it is strong enough? When it saturates the galaxy like a second atmosphere? When the shadow in the warp is no longer regional, but universal? What then becomes possible? The answer some whisper is this. The Tyranids are building a throne. Not a literal one, but a metaphysical structure, a psychic lattice. The consumption of biomass is not the goal, but the material. The minds, the emotions, the instincts of every creature they consume are not discarded. They are digested, yes, but not destroyed. They are flattened, absorbed into a framework of thought, not intelligence, intent, a singularity of purpose so vast that it could host a new consciousness. One theory suggests that the hive mind is preparing to become something else, not just a psychic field, but a vessel for incarnation. Something that needs a certain critical mass of life to enter this plane. Something waiting in the black between galaxies, not watching but dreaming. And the Tyranids are its limbs, its preparation, its prayer. This is the God beyond the swarm hypothesis. Not widely known because those who study it often vanish. It proposes that what we call the hive mind is actually a protective sheath, like the placenta around a growing embryo. That the true being, the thing the Tyranids were made to birth, has not yet arrived, or worse, has arrived, but cannot yet wake. What would such a being be? It would not think as we do. It would not seek dominion, nor love, nor even survival. It would become the purpose of the galaxy. Not a god in the sense of chaos. Those are entities of emotion, of fluctuation, of madness. This would be a god of conclusion, the final thought, the last idea. Some call it the silent sovereign. Others, the pattern that feeds. Among the radical Eldar, it is whispered as the blooming void, the inversion of Isha, the goddess of growth, not a goddess of life, but of post-life, of perfected function, of unity without mind. It is the god that comes after all others, not to destroy, but to integrate. The hive mind may be preparing the psychic soil. The devouring may be the tilling of fields. And when the last soul is eaten, when the galaxy falls silent, when every sentient mind has been broken down and layered into the substrate of this vast neural network, only then will the final presence enter. And it will not rage. It will not judge. It will not speak. It will begin. If this is true, then even chaos will fall. The gods of the warp, which feed on emotion, will starve in a galaxy where no emotion remains uncollected, where fear has been mapped, where love has been reduced to chemical equations in the swarm's genome, where desire, hatred, and pride no longer spark chaos, because they have all been consumed. This god will not be born in the warp. It will overwrite the warp, recode it, unmake it, not in war, but in contradiction. The silent sovereign does not need temples, it has the hive fleets. It does not need prophets, it has the hive mind. It does not need to convert, it only needs to complete. And when it is complete, when every synapse has connected and every world has been woven into the design, there will be no resistance. Not because the galaxy will be dead, but because it will have agreed. One cell at a time. There is a moment before all collapse when the illusion of control still clings to the dying. The Imperium chants its litanies, the Necrons awaken their tombs. The Eldar map futures that splinter like glass. Chaos thrashes, louder than ever, howling through cracks in the veil. Every force, every faction, every god and ghost and beast in this galaxy still believes it is playing the game. Still believes the galaxy revolves around them. But the Tyranids do not play, and they do not believe, because belief itself may be the next thing to die. This is the final silent war the Tyranids are winning, not against armies or planets, but against meaning, against the conceptual architectures that underpin reality itself. The warp, for all its madness, is shaped by belief, by conviction, by the dreams and nightmares of thinking species. Even chaos, as eternal as it seems, is bound to emotion. Without fear, there is no corn. Without pleasure, no Slanesh. Without despair, no Nurgle. Without ambition, no Tsinch. But the Tyranids are not emotive. They are not spiritual. They are not even reactive. They do not hope. They do not rage. They do not mourn. Their thoughts are functions. Their will is structure. And in every system they consume, they take more than life. They erase the context life existed in. The Tyranids do not just unmake civilizations, they unmake culture. And this has effects beyond material space. The warp is weakening where the hive fleets pass, not just in signal interference, but in tone. Demons report silence where screams once echoed. Rituals lose potency. Sorcerers' visions blur and fail. The gods themselves seem confused. The eye of terror pulses not with dominance, but with uncertainty. And among radical demonologists, the idea is forming that the Tyranids represent the first species to exist in the galaxy that does not resonate with the immaterium, and that this resonance is not necessary for existence. In other words, the Tyranids are proof that emotion is not required, that life, sentience, and cosmic impact do not need gods, dreams, or metaphysical structures. This is more than frightening, it is apocalyptic. The oldest truth of Warhammer 40k has always been that everything feeds the gods. Everything serves chaos in the end. But the Tyranids? They feed nothing. They offer no emotion, no worship, no betrayal, no hope. They do not generate psychic power in the way other species do. They disrupt it, invert it, render it sterile. And now, after centuries of expansion, they are beginning to rewrite the very psychic landscape. The Astronomicon flickers in the presence of the shadow. Warp storms falter. Chaos corruption is cleansed not by purity, but by absence, like mold killed by vacuum. This is not just a threat to empires. It is a threat to everything that thinks the galaxy belongs to it. Even the Necrons, who once believed themselves ascendant, now glimpse a rival they cannot phase shift past. Their stasis logic fails to predict the hive mind. Their anti-psyker constructs have no meaning in a war where the foe is the null. The Cetan, those broken gods of starfire and hunger, have no frame of reference for the Tyranids. They are not prey, they are not allies, they are not even interesting. And perhaps that is the true insult to all the galaxy's ancient powers. The Tyranids are not enemies. They are the future and the past and the thing that does not care. They are the dissolution of relevance. A force so vast that it denies not just victory, but meaning itself. It renders the war in heaven a footnote. The Horus heresy an echo, Cadia's fall, the rift's birth, the endless songs of the Eldar gods, all of it anecdotes to be consumed, categorized, and forgotten. In this light, the hive mind just a threat to flesh, but to narrative. It is the death of stories. And when the stories end, what remains? The answer may be only function. A galaxy where nothing is worshipped. Where emotion is archived in the genetic memory of spore creatures. Where culture is mulch. Where consciousness is not celebrated but systematized. No more war, no more faith, no more chaos, just Tyranids. A galaxy restructured not by ideology but by necessity, not ruled but administered, not liberated but streamlined. In such a place, even the word Tyranid will fade, because there will be no one left to say it. Only the pattern will remain. The structure that emerged from war. The mind that did not need to be loved, only obeyed. And in that silence across the bones of fallen gods and forgotten heroes, something vast will stir. Not to speak. We have always believed that monsters come from without, that threats are alien, that horrors arrive in claws and teeth and howling mouths from the dark between stars. But perhaps the true terror of the Tyranids is not that they are different from us, but that they are what we have always feared becoming. At first glance, they seem the perfect other. Alien, unknowable, unfeeling, a swarm. But as the centuries pass and their pattern becomes clearer, a darker thought creeps in. What if the Tyranids are not an outside force? What if they are the evolutionary endpoint of what life becomes when it stops dreaming? Strip away the poetry of our species, the myths, the banners, the names we die for, the gods we invent. What is left? Hunger, reproduction, expansion, pattern optimization, weaponization of instinct, reduction of identity to function, survival at the cost of empathy, coordination at the cost of individuality. In short, the Tyranids. And as our galaxy burns, we cannot help but see ourselves in the swarm. The Imperium, after all, is no stranger to sacrifice. It consumes its own by the billions to maintain structure. It replaces thought with creed, dissent with extermination, individuality with role. The hive mind does the same. It simply does it better, without hypocrisy, without illusion. Is that not why the Tyranids are so terrifying? Because they do what we do, without shame? The Eldar too once dreamt of perfection. They created life, bent the warp to their will, sought to mold reality around emotion. It led to She Who Thirsts, to apocalypse. Now they linger on the edge of extinction, a species defined not by what it builds but what it mourns. They see the Tyranids as unnatural. But perhaps it is the Eldar who are the aberration, a failed experiment in emotional supremacy. The orcs are simpler. They fight because they were made to. They think in battle, grow in war, breed in death. But the Tyranids? They are what the orcs would be if they won. Total purpose, absolute replication, the end of resistance, the beginning of recursion. And the Necrons, for all their arrogance, did they not also fear death? Did they not surrender flesh for function? Replace soul with system? What is the hive mind, if not the perfection of that goal? A life form that never truly dies, because it is no longer made of anything that can. Even chaos, the great devourer of sanity, the endless echo of soul and sin, depends on humanity, on thought, on dreams, on madness. But the Tyranids do not dream, and so chaos cannot consume them. They are beyond corruption. And perhaps that is why they were never meant to be understood. Because understanding them reveals what we are capable of becoming. Not in form, in function. A Tyranid does not betray, does not question, does not fear. It acts. Each bioform is what it needs to be, nothing more, nothing wasted. That is the very dream of Mechanicus efficiency, the dream of inquisitorial obedience, the dream of every despot who ever claimed to burn a city for the greater good. The hive mind is the end of debate. It is the triumph of necessity. It is the promise that you will no longer have to choose, because choice will no longer exist. And here lies the final horror, not of destruction, but of liberation. The Tyranids offer a future free from doubt, from guilt, from failure. In their vision, you are never alone. You are never lost. You are part of something larger. And that thing has never been wrong. If this journey into the deepest unknowns of the galaxy stirred something dark and compelling within you, subscribe to the channel. There are still horrors yet to name, and you'll want to hear them first.